live with, I'm Tom Matuska and Brett Wingfield, and we're with the Matuska Taxidermy Supply Company. And we're trying to show you a few things, and glad you joined us. Get these big pauses on. If you were with us the last few weeks, we did a wood duck project, and we made artificial parts. And it's kind of interesting when people come into the showroom, and especially people that are not familiar with taxidermy, and oftentimes the ladies have no idea that there's not a real head, it's not real eyes, it's not a skull with clay on it like it used to be, years ago. And when you start showing people that it's plastic parts, artificial parts, and we can buy them, you can make them. A lot of times we'll show people that come in, we'll open up a catalog, and they're just amazed at all the different things that go into an animal that aren't actually part of the animal, So anyway, last few weeks, we started out making you a wood duck head, how to make your own wood duck head. Now, we checked with Corey Carruthers because we carry Wildlife Illusions bird heads, finest bird heads in the world. Why would you want to show anybody how to make an artificial bird head? That is the dumbest idea anybody could ever do. We can't keep up the way it is. Why show people how to make a good product like that? But once you do this, you'll realize it's not as easy as you think it is, and you may go back to making your own bird heads, or you may become the second best bird head maker in the world. But this was a wood duck that we made probably as much as 3 weeks ago, didn't we? I think 2 weeks ago.
I'd say
it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the reason, if we were going to make an artificial head, just to recap, if we were going to make an artificial head to use the bill in our mount, we wouldn't have the neck on it. But this neck union to that head lined up so good, we left it on. We poured a mold, a rubber mold, out of RTP silicone, and once it was done, we took the organic head out and poured it full of our polycast, super polycast, and it comes out like this. From there, you took it, you removed the neck, sanded it down, made it factory looking, I call it, and we ended up with something like this. You drilled the eye out, added I think this was probably a live eye, was it?
Yes.
And we even last couple weeks ago, we showed you how to make eye rings. And a wood duck just isn't a wood duck without eye rings. And you can look back in the archives and you can see how we made the eye rings, how we put them on. There were some little dents and dips that you, I think you used clay. Did you use clay?
Yeah.
Ricky Crane's KLEI. It's a two-part epoxy. A great, great product. Any of you that like to do modeling on fish heads or sunken areas or rebuild areas, clay is a really good product. And it's one of the epoxies. So that's what the artificial head looked like. This one has been drilled out to accept the neck and the wire. And then I think last week, or maybe it was the last week we made the mold, or 2 weeks ago we made the mold?
2 weeks ago we made a mold.
And this was of the bird's foot. And this was like we told you, if you watch, this was overkill. You don't need to use this much rubber, but we kind of included a lot of bone. Bottom of the foot's included in here, and that all indexed together. We filled that through the top with super polycast, and we put color in it. So here's a couple of tries. This one came out kind of a little bit like a canary, and we switched to another color. But look how beautiful this is. Every single cell in this entire bird foot came out. That's
that's very pretty.
Look at the little skin on the side. That you couldn't buy a better product like that.
Nope.
And if you need it to fit, of course you're going to need it to fit a base, maybe around a limb or standing on a rock. we just warm those up with a heat gun. And if you watch where your knuckles are, you can bend them and shape them around rocks. We actually wouldn't use this bone. We'd cut it off and run a wire right up through. But that's just some of the stuff. This one we painted for you. That's just some of the stuff that we've done in the last few weeks. So if you want to go back and look at the archives, you can see how we did all of the wood duck products. And we're always molding and casting. And if you have never done it before, the only way to get familiar is to buy some and have some failures. Don't do it on anything that you're going to ruin. You might want to make a rock. We've made rocks. We've made wood. We've made fish heads. We've made everything you can think of that needs to be copied. And I always say, if you can hold it still for 5 minutes, we can make a mold of it. So frogs. I remember doing a competition piece for the World Show 20 years ago. It's probably the third World Show there ever was. And I got frogs. And I brought frogs in the fall. They were all dormant and kind of ready for hibernation. And I'd been fishing with them for walleyes. And I brought them in a little tub. And they came to life when they warmed up. And pretty soon I had no frogs. My whole studio was full of these frogs. But I made molds of the frogs, painted the frogs.
Poor frogs.
I needed Rodney Screws with me because
sounds
my
like a
frogs
Rod
did
project.
not look as good as his frogs did.
That's
so
funny.
here we are. Must be about May 27th. Am I close?
Must be close, yeah.
And we're going to start on a walleye project. And today we're going to show you, we'll talk about a couple different ways to begin your fish. Those of you that are interested, there's several different ways. There's reproductions, where you have nothing of the real fish. You either buy them or you can make them yourself. Some of the people make them themselves. You have half casts. We've never done a fish fill method. We've never done a half cast, but there are some people that do some really nice half cast fish. You can buy commercial bodies, or you can carve your own body. And we're going to try to touch on a whole lot of those different things. But today, mainly, we have a beautiful walleye here that, geez, it must be almost 30 inches long, 29 inches long. And we're going to show you if you're going to, no matter whether you're going to buy a body or if you're going to carve your own, I think measurements are real important.
I do too.
And for instance, you think from the catalog that a body's going to fit just perfect, and you take a couple measurements and order it. Maybe you skin the fish, and all of a sudden you got a skin and it doesn't fit at all, and you don't know why. If you had a sheet like this that you could go back to and realize that your body isn't quite exactly like that fish was. So we think it's real important to make a fish pattern. So this is a largemouth bass, I think, that we're going to be doing later. And these are just some of the measurements that we'll take, and we're going to show you how to do that with this walleye.
All right, so we have a lot of people tuning in. So hello everybody who has said hi, and thanks for tuning in. We love to see that. We do have a question from Christopher, and Christopher is wondering if you can make a mold directly out of this casted duck head instead of taking, again, a fresh duck head when the original mold is too old or broken. I think he was talking about the recap.
So making a mold out of something like this,
That's my understanding
if
of
it's
his question.
yours, right?
So making a mold directly out of the casted duck head.
Sure. As a matter of fact, what we would do if we were going to make this to reproduce, I myself would do what you did. I would take that bird head, I would make it beautiful, like I can use that. I could work with that every day. Then I would make a mold of this. Don't copy somebody else's
Right.
There's a lot of laws out there, copyright laws and things like that. So you can copy your own work. Just make sure that you don't copy, you know,
Yep.
Corey Carruthers or Mike Mikulski's or Joe Farabee's. Those people have put so much effort into their product that we don't want you copying theirs. But once you make one and you've tooled it to a beautiful product, make a mold of that, and you can make as many as you want. And when it wears out, you can remold your master and
Yeah.
do it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can do that, sure.
Yeah, save your master, save one of your first ones out of your mold and put that away and mold the master.
So I think this is a bought and body, or I'm sorry, this is a carved body, and we carve our fish out of, I suppose it's 1.5 pound. We call
Yeah.
it fish carving foam. Comes in a block. It's very soft, and you have to be careful because you can break this little throat latch. We've
Yeah.
done that more than once. You can break the tail, but it's the softer the foam, it seems like it's less expensive also.
Easier to
And
carve.
what does a bought and body? Hold that baby up, and what does something like that cost, roughly?
Looks like about $26.50.
$26 for that big walleye, and to carve that, I would guess you're going to have $15 worth of foam, maybe a little bit more. Now, once you get to be a proficient carver, you can make a beautiful fish every time, but in the learning process, you might go through a little bit of foam doing that. So I think I'll turn this over to you because you're like the best pattern maker I've ever seen, and you made this bass body, and you can kind of go through the steps, and we'll show you some of the tools and tricks that we use along the way. And we like to make the pattern first, measure the fish, and then we like to even carve the body while the fish is laying there, right?
I think we get better results, and the more that we've taught students over the years, leave the fish, this is the best reference they're going to get for that fish, so leave him whole until you have the closest representation you can in that body, and that's kind of what we like to do.
So go ahead and show them how we do it.
Okay, we'll get a few, should we also show them how to measure for a commercial body too?
Sure.
Just in case?
Sure.
I'll give you this for a
Brian
minute.
Davis is wondering if those are skin mounts behind you guys.
Those are all skin mounts.
Those are all skin.
We do a lot of skin mounts. There's a lot of, the trend is, I think, more reproductions now than ever before. When I first started, reproductions were rare because there were very few people who could make a convincing plastic fish. And now, man, there's some artists out there that can take a piece of fiberglass or a fiberglass positive, and they can make a beautiful, beautiful lifelike reproduction.
And the availability of nice blanks today seems to be much better than it was a ways back. Some of those, boy, I've seen some of those older ones. They're just a lot of work, a lot of work to get to a nice blank. But okay. So the first thing we would do in carving the body is take the fish over to the sink and clean him up. He's going to have lots of slime, he's going to have debris and all kinds of stuff. And the best thing to do that with is just the garden sprayer. You have one on your sink that's been there, that's the same hose that's been there for
It's been there
as long as I can remember.
Ever since it burst during the night and flooded the basement. We got a new one.
But we just spray him down with a garden sprayer. That will take all of the slime off, make him very nice to work with. We open him up, spray the gills out, spray out the interior of the mouth, and get him all nice and cleaned up. We did that off camera just so he would be dry and easier to work with at this point. But then we will take him, towel him, set him in a towel, and get him ready. Look at this fancy
You better
new.
tell them about that
I know.
while we're talking.
Well, you better tell him where it came from. It was Mike. Remember? Our
Nope.
student. Our student Mike brought him to us with a U.S. government thing.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yep. From work. So we've had grease pencils in our student toolboxes forever.
This is what we've always used.
And
it's my dad used to have these in the meat market. They would bag up a couple or wrap up in freezer paper pork chops, and they'd write on their pork chops, $1.98. You know, can't get a pork chop for $1.98.
No, you can't.
But that's what they were, and they're a little thicker.
Uh-oh.
Brian is, so continuation with the skin mounts behind you. If you have several fish skins in your shop drying, does the shop smell of fish? That has been keeping me from doing fish.
I would say never.
No.
I would say never. And you touched on it when you said blow the slime off. Slime is 85% where your fish smell comes from. And we wash that fish many, many times. We will take it over to the, depends on how big studio you have too. You know, if it's a little bitty room, maybe you're going to get away.
Yeah.
But we wash all the slime off really well. We put them through a bath where we have a bactericide, a deodorizer, borax, and salt, which really cleans up the fish skin. We mount them over styrofoam. We encase anything that there could be an odor in with like epoxy on the bottom of that musky jaw. His whole bottom jaw is encased in Ricky Crane's clay or Fix-It Sculpt we also like to use. And then they're sealed. And I don't remember anybody coming back for years and saying, I mean, if we're skinning fish, it'll be fishy back here. But when they go into the drying stage,
they'll smell like fish for a day, maybe. But no, decent circulation and proper care, like Tom had mentioned.
And we put them in front of a fan.
Away.
We put a fan on them. The faster they dry. So when I say never, I shouldn't be so adamant about never. But I'm kind of particular about people coming in and saying, "Oh, it stinks back here." So we try to keep as clean a shop as we can.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
should we go
measures for a body and tell them about that?
Yeah. Yep. So we have some directions from our customer. Always start with your directions.
Should I read them?
Yeah.
Okay. Mount to go with the other walleye that he has with the photo that's attached on a driftwood slab. See the attached. So we have pictures to go by. And it's basically, I think there was a walleye with a slight tail down picture. And he's going to go with this walleye. Now, we did this walleye years ago, and he's going to notice a quality change, an upgrade in the product. But this one is, we have a little, ran it off in the copier, a little black and white picture. He's going to be angled down and basically kind of a straight fish, I think.
And his head is going to
the left.
Which is important because we're going to need to determine which side we're going to cut him on. You don't have to make your pattern to the show side, but we want to evaluate the fish and make sure that he's in good shape on both sides. No big major scars. Fins are of equally decent quality. And since we know this one has to go left, there's nothing on here that would be a reason that you would contact your customer and say it can't. You have a great big gash out to the side. You might choose otherwise. But to look for a commercial body, the first thing you would want to take, and we usually take this when we measure the fish, when the customer brings it in, is an overall length. And we're going to measure this fish to the front of the jaw, right to the tail is looking like 28 1/4, about 28 1/4. And the next measurement we'll take, and that's just, that one is a rough measurement too. It's worth mentioning, sometimes you'll have a bigger tail, sometimes you'll have a smaller tail. That one is probably less critical, that overall. It's just to get you in the ballpark. The next one that is very important, which will determine the shape of the fish, is the greatest girth. And typically that's going to be somewhere between the vent and the cleatrum bone, somewhere in the middle. But just lay your tape around. Don't pull too hard where you can see here I'm drawing in the belly. Let's just make that nice and relaxed. And I'm getting a pretty good 16 slide it back and make sure it's not a little bit bigger back there. Nope, that's going to give me 16. Go up here just a little bit. And still 16 and a half, so that feels pretty good. 16 and a half is your greatest girth through the middle. So I'm just going to make a note of those. And this is hard to do upside down. We said 28 and a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And a circumference of 16 and a half. The next measurement that we use in the catalog is going to be a body length measurement. And you'll see that some companies will give you the cleatrum bone. If you've skinned fish or talked fish very much, you know that that's this little collarbone right here in the front. But it's a little bit ambiguous about where on the cleatrum bone to take that. If I were taking this measurement, I would go from the very front. So you'll have to lift up this gill cover. And we'd start right at the front of that. And we would go to the base of the tail, which is going to be about 18 3/4.
And all you have to do is look at the catalog, and they're going to have I'd call it a legend, something like this. It'll show you a diagram of how that particular company measures.
And that one we don't have listed for us, but some of your commercial bodies will. The next one is our critical one, which is, if I roll it forward here, you can see the center of the eye to the base of the tail. And this is real critical to the body length. And that I'm going to get, if I let him relax a little bit, about 22 and a half. About 22 and a half. So we'll go eye, tail. $22 and a half. So with that, you should be able to go to your catalog and see what you have.
You want to see what we got?
Yeah, how close can we get?
You missed everything. No. Now, another thing, after you've mounted a lot of fish, you're gonna realize that what's in the catalog, say, is 15 inches, and your fish is perfectly 15 inches, but you got a big gap when you try to put it on. How come?
Yeah.
And that skin has quite a bit of thickness. So
very true.
So if you have to go smaller, don't be surprised if it fits better than you think. But if we go to, you said 28 and a quarter, was it? My choices with the fish on fish forms are 28 or 20. I have two 29s. Then, if I go to your circumference, 16 and a half, the biggest I have in that area is probably a 15 and a quarter.
What about this one right here?
Oh, there we go, 16 and a half. But then we're down to a 27, which, okay, and how about for a meat length? 22 and a half. That one's really close. So that's a 22 and a quarter, 16 and a half, that's the right girth, correct girth, and 27. So we're slight, about an inch shorter.
And that inch shorter in overall length could be one fish had a little bit bigger head,
Sure.
Smaller head, could be a little bigger, smaller tail.
And there's nothing wrong with fudging a little
We
bit
can-
with a little
we can
clay or
move
something
that,
like
yep.
that. These can always be altered. We have before, just like we would a mammal,
Yeah.
cut them right through the center, extended them out, or put a little slab in there and fold
Yep.
them back together. We have oftentimes taken a rasp and made them slender. The first thing that, when it comes to fish, customers, like when I was in the meat market, you give customers cut up beef for them. The first thing they do is run home and put it on the bathroom
Yes.
scale and wonder why they didn't get, 300-pound side of beef.
Yeah.
Same with fish people. They go home and the first thing they'll do is say, my fish doesn't look
It's
as
not
big as
as-
what he was, and they'll grab a tape measure.
Yeah.
So don't short the length. That's the first thing
Yeah.
they're gonna grab.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Dustin is wondering, when using Tom's favorite fish pickling recipe, can you over pickle your skin? things.
Some fish, I think so. I think, I don't know, years ago when I learned how to do fish, they would leave fish in the pickle for, I call it a pickle, the fish preservative solution. They would leave it in there for 5 days. You know, I find that, this is just me, the skin gets thick, it absorbs fluids. When I go to put it on, I don't think you get a true reading of it's going to shrink up later. We find that muskies and northerns have a skin over their scales, and you got to watch so you don't get blisters, water blisters in them. We want to make sure we pop all those. So I don't know, our rule is 15-20 minutes for a little fish. Correct me if I'm misleading these people. You get into let's say a 3 to 4 pound bass, half hour to 45 minutes to an hour. Hour's fine. A fish like this, if we left him in an hour to 2, I think he'd be fine. I don't think you'd be in trouble leaving him overnight, but I'd prefer not to.
Yeah, I agree. I think that skin, when it takes on water and the salt content of our pickle, they get stiff. They don't seem to come back.
And then your scales don't lay as nice and smooth.
And another thing about shrinkage, the more water the skin takes on, the more it's going to have to dissipate later, and the more that skin is going to shrink. So it's all water, that's just more water that's going to have to come out of it later. So I don't think there's any advantage to. You've used gill color as a good rule of thumb too in the past.
We always look at the gills. When we spray the gills off to get the slime out of them. Put him into the fish pickle after he's thoroughly fleshed. When you see how we flesh this, skin it and flesh it, it's going to be clean. It's going to be remarkably clean. We put it into the fish preservative pickle, and you'll notice that the gills turn really light off-white beige. And as those gills lose their fleshy color and turn to the light off-white color, that's kind of what I go by. If they're looking bloody red, more natural, leave them in.
So hopefully that answered their question.
I would say not over pickle. And let me go back too. If you want to save a fish, say we do fish in batches. We do a lot of batches of fish. If you want to keep the smell down, I'll be skinning a fish here, you'll be skinning a fish there. Instead of mounting that fish and getting everything ready to mount, we'll skin a batch. We might do, 20 fish. And so once that fish is skinned, we oftentimes lay it out, we wash it up real good, lay it out, sprinkle it with salt, and lay it in a tub. At the end of the day, that tub either goes in the refrigerator or it goes in the freezer. Either one's fine, but it's salted, and we can always pull off the fish, and the salt preserves them just like a hide, but we don't let them dry like a deer hide, but it takes all the juices out of them. When it comes to mount fish, we'll have that tub in the freezer, and we'll take off a stack of maybe 5 or 6 fish, whatever we're going to do that day. We'll put them into the fish preservative, frozen, and even though they're frozen, they're pliable because of the salt, and wash them up like that and preserve them and mount them one at a time. The next day we'll take out another stack of fish, put them in the preservative.
So we're not really, you can skin a fish and mount a fish in the same day.
Sure.
But for efficiency, efficiency? So we'll do those in batches, and it works really well. So you may, and we've also had, on that subject, we've had customers request the meat, bring us a fresh fish, and not have a lot of time. You do this for us a lot. We'll cut them, take the meat out, put the fish on a board, rough skinned, not fleshed and pretty, but just rough skinned, and then just saran wrap it. That works real good. And then when we're skinning fish, we'll take that fish out, and it's just one less step that we have to deal with.
So going back to the commercial body, so we selected one here that looks pretty good, And that one right there, it is a WES 41L. It's a left turn, so that is, what did we need? We needed a left turn.
We needed a left.
So that's a perfect direction. He wants him angled down. Fish, incidentally, which took me a couple years to learn when I first started doing fish. I thought I knew everything about a fish because I caught so many. Try not to crank the tails up or crank the tails down. That motion is much more subtle than the sideways motion. I mean, many fish can almost turn around and bite their own tail, but as far as an up or a down, kind of watch the angle to stay in a natural pose. Most of your, if they wanted a real fighting up pose, I would tend to do it by tipping the fish like this rather than cranking the tail in a big U, or having the fish going down after a night crawler like that rather than having the tail way down. So watch your motion, and Brett will show you that when he makes a pattern. But you're gonna go, you could get this fish in today, make a pattern of it. You don't have to skin it right away, or you could rough skin him and, like you said, put him on a board just to keep him nice and straight, and you can order the body, and when the body comes you can get the fish out and finish the skinning and flushing process.
And even though we have a potential body that looks close, we do know it's a little short, we will still, even if it were perfect, we would still make a pattern. Still make a good solid pattern, and that's for reference for later.
If this absolutely doesn't fit, you've got that to fall back on.
Yep, and we can carve from that body. So shall we go through and make a pattern?
Sure.
Okay. One of the important things, we've already blown him off and cleaned him of all the slime and so forth. One very important thing that Caitlin, you might even want to show them is we want to position the fish exactly as he's going to be in the carving. So if he were to have a wide open mouth, if that's what our customer had asked, we would need to open that mouth significantly, and we can't just push the bottom jaw down like this. When he opens his mouth, he opens from this bottom portion here, this throat latch area, for lack of a better term. That has to be depressed. So right now, if I just had the mouth open, you could see here, if I roll your camera up, he just has this push down kink right there at his jaw. What we want to do is push the tongue all the way down. So I will open the jaw even more. And notice when I push the tongue down, that area now fills out nicely. And we have a much better lower visual line right through here. And if you can do that without poking your fingers, that works really good. I might need an ear splitter.
Ear splitters?
Yeah. We can, a fun little trick is to use an ear splitter inside the mouth, and that will help hold that bottom jaw open to the position that you want. Now, a largemouth bass can open his mouth almost as wide as his body. If you were to have him chasing, you can certainly do that, but make sure that the body accommodates the amount that the mouth is open. This fish looks like he's going to go with another fish that has a fairly closed mouth, so we probably don't need to crank the mouth open too wide on this one, but what do you think? Just a little parted?
Sure.
And we'll do that. Incidentally, those fish on fish forms are carved with a slightly open mouth, not intended to be a wide open mouth. The next thing that we would want to look at is that the head isn't cranked up too high or too low. And as Tom had said, we're going to look at the position of the fish. Scoot over here a little bit. Whoops, wrong way, sorry. That we're not cranked up too high like this or down too far that way. We're just going to have a fairly nice natural swimming pose for this one to follow that other fish. Something like that. And this, incidentally too, this fish has a nice big belly. Sometimes fish don't have that. They're post-spawn fish or summertime fish. It makes a big difference in the shape of the fish. If you were to slightly bring the body down like this, you can see the belly fills out, versus bringing the body up. This really tightens up and changes the profile of the fish quite a bit. I'll turn it this way so you can see, versus this. That relaxes the skin and allows you to fill that out a little bit more. This one's a nice big fish, so we don't have to cheat him either way. And now, once we have him positioned as we would want to see him, I think we'll just make a quick pattern, a tracing. In making the tracing, I'm going to use this fancy little skinny pen.
With the price tag still on?
From Mike. We want to make sure, and the reason that we mention this pen is because as we're making a line, we've used this pen for years and years, and I've gotten so used to it, there's a slight cant in because of the thickness of the pen. So if I were to mark here versus here, I have two completely different thicknesses just in the angle that I'm presenting the pen. So what I'm going to do is use this narrower one, and I'm going to try and stay straight down on the fish. Okay, I'm going to start up at his head, so you might have to back out just a little bit, and I'm going to go all the way to his tail. So yeah, there you go. We don't need to go to the tip of the jaw. We're just going to go to the tip of the cleathrum right up here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just mark that. I'm going to move back a little bit. I'm going to mark the front of the pelvic fins. Then I'm going to go down the body line and go to the front of the vent, the back of the vent, the leading edge of the anal fin, where that quits, the skinniest part of the tail. And then I'm also going to spread the tail in the position. Now be careful that your tail is hydrated. I'm going to spread this tail, and I'm also going to mark the contour of the tail, and that is this body angle. And then I'm going to mark where the tail quits.
Kind of like a stewardess here showing you how to use your oxygen mask.
Hold them up and show them. Then I'm going to come around the top side. You might have to come over a little bit, Kate, to see this part, but I'm going to mark the back of the dorsal, the leading edge of the dorsal, back of the dorsal, front of the spiny dorsal, and then, very important, the top of the head, where the head quits, where the meat quits in the top of the head. I'm going to mark that. And just for reference, I'm also going to mark the center of the eye. One additional measurement or mark that we can't get from tracing the profile is the body length that we had mentioned earlier, where this cleathrum bone is. So I'm just going to take that straight down, and I'm going to put a little mark on the paper above and below. I'm going to note that with just a little arrow. So something like that. Now that I have all the markings without disturbing the fish, I'm just quickly going to make the tracing. Being very careful that I'm not leaning in or out with the marker. And since I can't really go tight to the fin, because of the fin, I can't go tight to the body, I'm just going to skip past that, come in here, and then do the same around the top profile, top visual line. This dorsal fin lays down just well enough. I'm going to sketch that in, knowing that I probably am going to be a little tall right there. And then I'll come over and do the top of the body. I think that's all of them. Did I get them all? Did I miss anything?
No, you did good.
Yeah, okay.
I tried to follow along with my finger. It probably confused them.
And then we're going to remove him. And now we have this funny outline that probably doesn't look like much of anything to people. But we're going to play connect the dots. and hopefully make it look a little bit more fishy. So right here, the first thing I'm going to do quickly is mark the front of the cleathrum bone. That's these 2 arrows, and I'm just going to bring that straight up on my paper. I'm going to take the throat latch, which we know to be very skinny, and I'm going to bring that back to the cleathrum, or just short of. I'm going to bring that up the front of the head, and we like to give just a little shelf on the top of the head for the brain cavity, for a shelf to sit on, and you'll see that included on the Fish on Fish forms. And incidentally, Kate, if you can show the body, this is what we're referring to, this shelf here from the front of the head. If you have your body completely skinned, the end of this shelf will show to the center of the eye, because that's where it's marked. Now on a walleye, that's a lot of material on your bass.
And that takes a good skinning job too.
It does. You really have to get a lot of the cartilage, all the cartilage out of the top of the head, but if you do that, that is intended to be to the center of the eye. Same with our other species as well. So just a quick little guideline, helpful hint there. I'm also going to trace the dorsal fin, where the soft dorsal was that we skipped, right here. I'm going to bring that in, and it's worth noting this shape is more concave, or convex, outside curve versus an inside curve. So on your paper, you're going to want to trace that as accurately as possible. Notice it doesn't sit up real tall, but there is just a little bit of a rise there. Comes in, and then the same with the bottom. And that's got a little bit of an S to it. And then lastly, Kate, you might show just a little bit. We drew these funny little marks here on the tail. These second marks, we're just going to continue those across the paper on the angle that they were, and then connect these back dots, these back lines that we drew, and this is going to give us our basic shape of the tail contour. And that's pretty, we're going to trim that back, but that would be kind of this shape that we have on the commercial body. Did I confuse everybody?
No, that's great.
Now, do you want to show them some measurements?
Sure.
And then we do have a question on YouTube from Jim Rice, and he is wondering if you can show us how to save the cheek meat and which paper are you using?
The paper, the easy question, is the paper is, we call it freezer paper, but it's used to be wax. Now it's just poly-coated freezer paper, and comes in a roll. And we have a little paper cutter, and we use this in the shop.
Oh man,
all the time.
Be lost without it.
And we would be. And as far as the cheek meat, when we skin this fish, we will show you how to get this out of here. And with a lot of care, I like to use borax on my hand. So if you're using the cheek meat to eat it later, you won't want to use borax, you know. Right. So we will show you that. I don't think we're going to skin the fish today. We will show you that probably in the next session. But remind us, and we'll get out as large of a piece of cheek meat as you can possibly get out.
It's a nice size walleye.
This is a big walleye. Okay, now let me put him back.
And then we have a question on Facebook from Craig Metz, and Craig says, I usually put a little block of fish foam in its mouth to hold the tongue down while making my pattern. Is this a bad idea?
Sure.
Sure it's a bad idea, or
sure it's a good idea. The only thing, like Brett showed you, make sure you get it past the lip so it's on the tongue.
Correct.
Because if you just part the lips, and he mentioned he holds the tongue down, but if you just part the lips, which a lot of people are going to do, you're going to get this break in the profile, which is not natural. But like you did, you put the ear splitter in there, and that pushes that tongue down, which gives you a natural profile here. And yeah, if the styrofoam, put the styrofoam in and hold that tongue down, it's perfect.
Make sure he doesn't bite you.
I've got one more quick question from James. It says, hey guys, why do you not use a top pattern?
A
top pattern, you can do a top pattern.
You absolutely can, yep.
That's a very good point. As a fish turns, this is a, I call it, it's optical illusion or whatever it is. If this fish were mounted like this in a curve, we would almost always take a top pattern, put the same marks. You don't have to have the accurate measurements, just so you can see where he turns, which is very, very helpful. On a fish that does not have a tremendous curve, we get by without a top pattern. But if we're going to get real extravagant with something really, a bass especially, really jumping, it's very nice to know how that, where that head and tail starts and stops.
And in making the top pattern, you just want to make sure that you're also taking an accurate measurement of the body, because oftentimes when you make the top pattern, the fish widens because of the weight of the fish against the paper. So your top pattern is really good for a spinal line,
For instance,
and for where the top of the head is and the center of the head.
this fish is really, just to show you, that wide. But if I were making a top pattern, he's going to be half-inch wider, just
easily,
just because the weight. Are those good bubbles?
They're good bubbles.
Those are happy bubbles?
There is a lot.
That's good.
I'll tell you, when I started mounting fish 40 years ago, God had just taken away the legs from them and stuff like that, and gave them fins instead. But we use the Sac Method, and for those of you old-timers out there, probably none of you know what the Sac Method is, but in its day, it was a very exceptional way to do a one-sided fish. It's difficult getting symmetry, but we did the Sac Method. So the better taxidermists you were seeing they were doing carved bodies. And I thought, I want to teach myself how to carve bodies. I was too proud to go to one and ask them, how do you do it? So I thought, I can figure this out. I'm smarter than the average bear. So I started doing it. And it took me 2 full years to come up with a system that evolved into what we do now, But it was very, very difficult, and there's a lot of little things that can throw you off. But you're getting the real education on how to carve a fish body. So we want measurements. I would like to take a measurement with the mouth open, where you made, where the head joins the body. I'm just going to draw a straight line right down through there. I'm going to have a height measurement there. I'm also going to have a width measurement, and I'm going to have a circumference. I'm going to have overkill on measurements because you can't have too many. I would like another measurement where the clathrm is. Right here, I'm just going to draw another straight line. It's going to be height, width, circumference. This sounds terrible. It's going to take you all day to do. Once you have a little bit of practice, it's going to be a 7-minute job or less. Back here, I'm going to take a measurement right through the body like so. Depending on the shape of the fish, if it's a northern that's maybe 44 inches long, I might take another one through the center, through the fattest part of the fish. Optional. If there's a body change, take it. If there's not, don't take it. I am going to take one. His body often changes shape at his vent. That's where his digestive system ends, and that's where his reproduction system ends. So I'm going to take one right before, and I'm going to take one right after. I'm going to take one right where that fin starts. I'm going to take one where that soft dorsal joins the body. I like to take one where his hourglass shape right here is before his tail, and I'll take one back there. Sounds terrible, but
Not so bad.
I'll just take, I usually have a ruler for this, a metal ruler that I lay
can
out.
get it for you.
But we can do it with a tape, it'll be
I'll
fine.
grab it. I know.
So, I'm going to do all heights to start with. If you do a lot of fish, it's kind of handy to have something like this laid out. Thank you. And I'm going to open the mouth. What did you have? About something like this?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go right to the end of that throat latch because that's where I'm measuring right here. I want that to be 3.5. So we'll do this one at 3.5. I'm going to do these sideways because it's easier for me to write.
Easier.
Where the head starts, joins the body, and you can tell by tapping on the top of it, you can hear the skull compared to the meat.
Yeah.
Be real accurate at where that's at. That's going to be 4.25.
You know, and worth noting too, while you have your calipers measuring the height, lay them against your pattern. And just to know that you had that tipped, I traced this upside down, so I can't promise that every one of those measurements is exactly the same in the tracing as they are on the fish, but you want to be absolutely as accurate as possible. So maybe show them to drop that onto the...
You made a real good point when you're talking about the thickness of that grease pencil,
Yeah.
or how you tip it, because people will draw this and they've already added a strong A 3/16 on the belly and on the back, and then they want to be real safe when they cut this out so they don't waste foam, so they're going to go on the outside of that line, which is another 1/8, and then they're going to trace that onto their styrofoam, and then they're going to be extra safe so they don't make it too small, and pretty soon you got a fish that's an inch too big all over the place. Okay, now I'm just going right down the line on where we took these measurements. These are all my heights. And just, I'm not denting them in. And watch these when they're new, they'll slip real easy on you. Tighten them up and don't let them be loose. But I'm just letting them slide over the fish skin. And some of these you'll have to twink and work a little bit as you're carving and test fit. Okay, so that's all my heights. Now, I would like a whip where you go into where the body goes into the head, joins the head up here.
Yeah.
This tapers.
Kate, you might show them that on the...
This
with the
tapers
camera.
right here, kind of narrow. Make sure that a lot of people carve this too heavy, and all of a sudden he looks like a bullhead. So we want him real narrow up here. And you can kind of see between the gills, and that's going to depend on how much meat you take out of that skull. We're going to clean up that skull really, really, really well. So I'm about 1.1/8 inches. And to differentiate between heights and widths, I'm just going to put a W after the width. Up here, 4.5, I know that's not a width, it's easy to figure out, but when you get down into the tail, it can be a little bit trickier. Now, under these, or the cleathron bone, I want to lift up and get under the gill flap. Make sure you're not measuring that gill flap because there's a lot of thickness there. And I got 3 1/4. And I just put a W to differentiate. I want, I think you had it right at the beginning of those fins. Just so it slides.
Yeah.
If you're too tight, you could rip off scales if it were like a crappie or something. 3 1/2. Fattest part of the fish. And I'm lifting him off, not
Yeah,
like what we
that's a good
talked about
point. Yep.
earlier. I'm lifting him off.
Very, very good point, because again, if he were laying on the table, he could be as much as an inch wide, an inch too wide.
Okay. Before and after his vent, you'll notice the biggest body changes. If you see me doing something bad, showing them, teaching them bad
No,
habits.
this is all good. I learned everything I know from you.
See now, it's kind of interesting because as I get down here, we're 5 and 3, 5 1/2, 3 1/2, 6 and 4. No way you're going to get those mixed up. Down here, I'm 2 and 2. You know,
Yeah.
they're getting much closer to one another.
Yeah.
And then when you get down into the tail, it's pretty difficult and subjective to what you get here. It's always going to be about 1/4 inch, just depends on where you slide it, if you wanted to write it down or not.
And with the thickness of your skin, that's
Yeah.
even going to be a little, you're going to carve it wider than it actually is, but it's a good starting point.
Now, just because you have a fish body 6 inches like height by 4 inches wide,
Yeah.
a square block like this can be 6 by 4.
Yeah.
So we also want to get a circumference, which is going to help you when you start to carve the body. And I'm not going to take circumferences all through everywhere, but I would like to have one at my cleather bone. I'm not going to pull it tight. Let's say 14 3/4. And I'm just going to put a circle around it so I know it's a circumference. I'm going to put the heaviest part of the fish, 17, where he's the fattest, 17-inch circumference. I might take one down here just before his vent, and I'm 13 1/2. If you want to take one after, I got 12. Now that fish changed 1.5 inches in less than 1/2 inch.
Yep, drastically changed. So that's why those are so critical. Those 3 measurements might be the most important ones on the fish.
And then I'll take one way back by the tail, and we got 5 inches. And that's right, what was he, 28 1/4?
Yep.
I'm going to write that on here. Total length, 28 1/4 inches. When we mount this fish, I always like to take that skin, lay it out, put it at 28 1/4 with my body in it, and start pinning them into place. And that should come out to what you need.
Yeah.
I'm going to write the person's name on here. I would like to say which direction we cut him. We wanted the head left, right?
We want to cut right, head show left. Yep.
Okay, I'm going to put cut on the right side, which is this side, right?
Yes.
Cut right, head to the left, and we'll check that many times.
Yes.
We have cut the wrong side of a
We
fish
have.
before, and sometimes we've put them back together and fixed him because it was that important to the customer.
Yeah.
Cut right, head left. Person's name.
And one more thing that's really important that that you've done here is notice all of Tom's measurements are on the inside of the pattern. I can't tell you how many students we see that do all of these nice, beautiful measurements, and then they write all of the numbers just so it's nice and neat outside the pattern, cut the pattern out and take it over to the foam and then think, oh my gosh, where'd my measurements go? So good habit to get in right inside the pattern, so that your measurements are always with you rather than on the scrap piece of paper that you have to throw away.
We're about out of time, but real quickly, I'm going to take my knife, and you can use the scissors, but with my knife on this, for my countertop, I can cut this out really well. And a really nice, neat marks. Just follow your marks. Now we'll skin a bunch of fish and we'll have all these patterns in a little pile with the customer's receipts, and we'll get out fish skins and we'll carve these bodies and have the bodies all ready to go.
So we'll have a skinning day, a carving day, and a mounting day typically.
And a fish fin day.
And a fish fin day, and an
painting day.
epoxy day, and a seam day, and an eye setting day.
Okay, now this is pretty important, so keep track of it. Now, just like Brett said, all my measurements are inside the fish body, so there's nothing here that I need.
Correct.
So next week, I think I may be gone. Are you going to be by yourself?
I'm going to be by myself. That's
I
scary.
don't want to reference collecting. But we're going to take this, I think, and put it onto a piece of styrofoam and show you how to carve and shape. You're actually going to teach them how to be a sculptor. And they're going to be a styrofoam sculptor.
Yep.
So real quick, we have a question from Ben on YouTube, and Ben says, hi guys, do you practice the use of wood wool for some bodies? Also, do you love, preserve, and rebuild bird skulls of any sort, or do you only use artificial heads? Would be a great live video, thank you.
On that wood, and no, we do use the real head because there's a lot of birds that you just can't get heads for. Occasionally, we have a bird come through that we don't have a hen for. Some of the little birds, we do a lot of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Nature Centers, and we get raptors and things like that we don't have heads for. Some of the companies carry them, but rather than buy them, we will use the real skull, and we can show you how. That'd be a good one. You should write down. Wood wool for bird bodies is an art, and we used to do it exclusively. And I think that would be a great thing to show people because someday with foam being scarce, we may be going back to that method.
Yeah, you
That's
never
a good
know.
question. And people could do it on fish too.
Yeah.
I've seen a baby giraffe, which is a big animal. A baby giraffe, and I've
That's a
seen
big
African
animal.
lion mounted with wrapped bodies that
Oh my
would rival any taxidermist these days.
Yeah.
Sounds like Jig and Jim wants to come down and help.
Okay.
We'll let him boil skulls.
We'll take it. Yeah, no kidding. Next week, we are actually going to take the week off.
Oh.
Because you are gone.
You lucked out.
Yep.
I
So
did,
we have
thank
a
you.
week off next week, but we will catch you the next time and continue this. Out of curiosity, for all those watching that aren't taxidermists but getting into it, but maybe are fishermen and are going to bring their fish to a taxidermist, how would you take care of, in a summary, what to do with your trophy?
You tell him. You take care of trophies real well.
No.
You take care of all my trophies I catch.
All of them. The best thing they can do is take care of it as fresh as possible. So get it taken care of, get it into, if you have to, get it into a live well. Better yet is get it directly into a cooler and get it directly to a taxidermist. But if you're going to be on the water for the rest of the day, get it taken care of. Probably if you have 2 live wells, keep it separate from other fish just to keep the fins in as good a shape as possible. You can see on this fish it's got a couple little splits, but for the most part the fins are in good shape. And then once you get it, if you're not able to drop it off at your taxidermy studio immediately, take it home and wrap it in a terry cloth towel. You've done that for years and years. And I've mounted some of these fish that have been in the freezer many years.
Forms a ice cocoon around them. And in our freezer, things get moved from one place to another, and it just really protects them.
Not only does it protect the fins like a cast, it also holds moisture next to them. I've done a couple fish projects for shows, and the last one I did had been in there for 10 years. So, not proud of that, but it mounted nice.
It was resting comfortably.
Yeah, it was resting comfortably.
So terry cloth towel and in the freezer immediately until you can get to your taxidermist. Do you bag it or just a terry?
Perfect question, thank you. Yep, seal it in plastic. So garbage bag, or we use saran wrap a lot of times. That works real well.
Yeah, plastic wrap on a big roll, and we just roll them. It works real well.
Yep, that creates
So pass
that
that on to
barrier.
the customers to save your time. So the split fins, that is due to freezer burn, dryness. What would that, or it could just be the fish?
All of that.
Yeah.
Fish have better fins than most people end up with when they're mounted. Like a lot of this, and this is drying out, we got to get this wet, but a lot of this is done from nets or getting in the boat and flopping around, and get a fresh fin, a fish, and spread a fin, and you'll marvel at how uniform and smooth they are.
Nice and smooth and even.
And that's your choice for the customer if he wants to leave them or include all of that in the mount, or if you'd rather keep them, you know, make them more perfect.
All right, so thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks.
Giveaway.
I think we
what's your
got
giveaway?
The giveaway is from Mike. Put me on the spot. From New York/Illinois. Our new grease pencil, U.S. government grease pencils. And I mean, our patterns have taken a great leap to the accurate side with this compared to the heavier ones that we've had. And it'll write on, grab me one of them big ones there. We still use these all the time. We use them on a lot of our mannequins and writing on things, but this is much finer and much more precise. And you can write on wet paper, and it's not like a marker, which peters out as you're drawing. And that's our giveaway.
And the 8-inch calipers.
Oh yeah.
And the silver
and our tape measure. We don't have our tape measure.
Mine lights up.
Well, this is like a grab bag today.
And the winner goes to Gage Wolf.
Gage, you're gonna like it. You can use this for any kind of pattern, whether it's bird bodies or fish patterns or
deer
cane
heads,
whatever. And a nice Matuska taxidermy tape measure comes with that also.
So congratulations, Gage, and you can get in the drawing for next week, or 2 weeks, for liking, sharing, and tagging a friend in this video. And Jig and Jim, come visit anytime, because we can come visit you in your tropical area. And give us a call if you guys have any questions.